Life has a way of throwing obstacles at us just when we feel most vulnerable. For me, Emily, that truth was undeniable at 27. My world seemed to be stuck in a relentless cycle of chaos. Days blurred into one another, marked only by a mind-numbing job that drained the life out of me, and nights spent in bitter arguments with Rowan, my boyfriend of 5 years. Rowan was a man of extremes. On his good days, he was the kind of person who could make you laugh until your stomach hurt. On his bad days, he could turn cold and distant, his words sharp as knives. Our relationship was frayed, pulled apart by endless, meaningless fights, the kind we always forgot by morning. One dreary Thursday night, we found ourselves in our usual spot, a tired diner where the stale air clung to the walls like a forgotten memory. The setting, as always, was perfect for yet another fruitless confrontation. "Why do you have to be so difficult, Emily?" Rowan's patience was thin, his voice strained. "Difficult? You're the one who's impossible to talk to," I snapped back, my frustration rising as our voices grew louder. We went in circles, returning to the same tired topics: money, commitment, our future, each word cut deeper than the last. When we finally left, the cold night air did little to cool our tempers. We walked home in silence, each lost in our own spiraling thoughts. At our cramped apartment, the quiet between us stretched on, suffocating. Our words had run dry, leaving only the bitterness of the argument and the constant ticking of the clock, a reminder of the time we were wasting. Lying in bed, I found myself asking where it had all gone wrong. Was this really my future? Endless arguments with a man who was starting to feel like a stranger. The thought felt like a heavy weight pressing on my chest, and I couldn't breathe. In that moment, I knew something had to change. What I didn't know was that life was already planning a course that would shatter everything I thought I knew. I fell asleep that night with a storm of doubts swirling inside me, unaware that my world was about to be torn apart in ways I couldn't imagine. Tragedy struck just when I thought it couldn't get worse. A devastating car accident left my parents and me in its wake. When I regained consciousness, my world was shattered. My parents were gone, and I was left broken, my spine severely injured, my legs unresponsive. I couldn't picture a future anymore. It felt like my life had ended in that instant. As I lay in the cold, sterile whiteness of my hospital room, the weight of loss and isolation pressed down on me. Yet, amidst the despair, I began to wonder if there might be a way forward, even if it meant starting anew from the ruins of my old life. The doctors spoke of my long, painful road to recovery, warning that it might never end. "Rehabilitation will be a long journey," they said, their voices carefully neutral, tinged with the faintest sympathy. They were cautious not to give false hope. In those long, indistinct days of mourning and uncertainty, Rowan came to visit, his parents in tow. Their faces were strained, their smiles unnatural, as if they were trying to be strong for my sake. Rowan approached my bedside, his eyes filled with something I couldn't place, a resolve that made me uneasy. What could he possibly offer that could ease my suffering, I thought. "Emily," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I know this is the worst possible time, and I can't even begin to imagine what you're going through, but I can't hide my feelings anymore. I love you, more than I've ever loved anyone." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Then, without warning, Rowan knelt beside my bed, his expression both earnest and vulnerable. "I love you, Emily, more than anything. Marry me, let me be the one to take care of you, to stand by you through this and whatever comes next." Behind him, his parents watched, their eyes glistening with tears. His mother nodded silently, wiping her eyes, while his father, usually a man of few words, placed a steady hand on Rowan's shoulder. Overwhelmed, I was consumed by a flood of conflicting emotions: fear, love, uncertainty, and the smallest flicker of hope. But as I gazed into Rowan's eyes, something inside me shifted. "Yes," I whispered, my voice barely audible, "I'll marry you." The joy that spread across Rowan's face was a light I hadn't seen in years, a warmth that felt like the first rays of the sun after a storm. "We'll take care of you, Emily, like you're our own," his parents promised, stepping closer. The wedding we had was simple, far from the fantasy I had once imagined, but sitting in my wheelchair, surrounded by the love of friends and family, I felt a deep sense of rightness in that moment. As Rowan and I exchanged vows, they were more than words, they were promises, strong and enduring, a testament to the uncertain road ahead. As our lips met in a kiss that sealed our vows, for the first time since the accident, I allowed myself to believe that life wasn't over. It had just taken an unexpected turn, one that I wouldn't have to face alone. After the wedding, we moved into a new home, a spacious place, modified for wheelchair accessibility, left to me by my parents. At first, Rowan seemed fully committed, quitting his job to care for me, the inheritance more than enough for our needs. But soon, his efforts began to wane, the promises he made started to fade, leaving me to navigate a life that was growing increasingly difficult. Though he didn't need to work, Rowan spent most of his days either playing games on his computer or out at bars with friends. He came home late, often drunk, and when he did speak, his words were cruel, calling me a burden. It wasn't just Rowan. His parents, once warm and caring, now treated me with cold indifference, as though I were a mistake their son had made. I opened up to Avery about the darkest truths surrounding Rowan and his parents. The weight of my confessions hung heavy in the air, a sharp contrast to the usual lightness of our friendship. Avery's response was a mix of outrage and clear-headed determination. "Emily, we need undeniable proof," she said, her voice tinged with urgency. "What if we set up cameras around the house, catch them in the act?" Though the idea felt extreme, it also felt like the only way forward in the midst of my growing sense of desperation. Avery moved quickly, positioning small, hidden cameras in strategic places around the house. The days that followed were agonizing as we waited for the footage to be ready. When we finally reviewed it, the depth of the betrayal was even worse than I could have imagined. Rowan's voice was unmistakable. "Once Emily is out of the way, everything here will be ours. We'll live like kings," he said, his words laced with an unmistakable greed. His mother's laughter, chilling and cold, echoed through the speakers. Their words were poisoned with malice, exposing their plans to take everything from me. But what truly struck me was the surprising involvement of Rowan's usually quiet father. "Keep quiet," he whispered, his voice low. "We can't let her suspect anything until it's too late. The quicker she's out of the picture, the better." Avery and I exchanged a look, both of us stunned by the revelation. It wasn't just about stealing from me, they were planning to remove me from my own life entirely. "How could they do this?" I whispered, my voice barely a murmur, as the reality of their malice crushed me. Avery squeezed my hand tightly. "We won't let them win, Emily," she said, her voice a promise. "You're not alone." The weight of our next steps felt monumental. Confronting them directly seemed too dangerous given their intentions. I needed to think carefully. "I need time to process this," I said softly, my mind racing with a plan that would turn the tables on them. They thought they had me cornered, but I wasn't going down without a fight. Avery nodded, resolute. "They've made a mistake. We'll figure this out." As we strategized, the audio of their scheming played on in the background, a grim reminder of what was at stake. Each new detail strengthened my resolve to take back what was mine. Dinner that evening felt like a facade. Rowan and his parents acted as though nothing had changed, their glances full of secret knowledge they believed I was unaware of. Their attempts at normalcy were sickening, and as the evening dragged on, the distance between us felt wider than ever. Finally, driven by both hurt and defiance, I turned to Rowan. "Look at me," I said, my voice firm. He hesitated but eventually met my gaze. "Do you love me?" His response was delayed, the smile he offered strained and hollow. "Of course I love you, you're my wife." His words, meant to placate, only deepened the chasm between us. The next morning, when I found that the ramps had been removed, it felt like a calculated move to trap me even further. I confronted them at breakfast, the frustration spilling over. "Why take away the ramps? How am I supposed to move around now?" "It's for your safety, dear," my mother-in-law said, her concern as fake as her imitation pearls. "We thought you might fall. It's for the best." I knew better. Their concern was nothing but a thin veil over their true motive, to further isolate me. But I said nothing, choosing silence as the calm before the storm that was building within me. Behind closed doors, I put my plan into motion. I contacted disability services and enlisted the help of my lawyer. When they arrived, Rowan and his father were blindsided, their faces filled with disbelief and fear as the team began their inspection. My lawyer wasted no time. "We're here to conduct a thorough inventory," he announced. After Emily's parents passed, a detailed list was made. "We're here to ensure everything is where it should be." As the process unfolded, the extent of their betrayal became undeniable. Missing items, once a part of my family's legacy, my mother's jewelry, my father's fine suits, heirloom paintings, were gone. Each loss hit like a blow to my chest, but I remained steadfast, focused on the task at hand. The antique dishes, once symbols of love and tradition, were gone as well. Rowan and his parents were exposed, their guilt mounting with every item that was listed as missing. My mother-in-law broke down in tears, her voice trembling with guilt. "We're so sorry, dear, it all just spiraled out of control. Please, can we move past this?" Her husband mirrored her plea, his voice heavy with regret. "We never meant to hurt you. It was foolishness, greed. Please forgive us." Forgiveness wasn't something I could offer. Their actions had crossed a line too far. I turned to the police officers present and presented the irrefutable proof, my lawyer's list, the audio recordings. "These are the people responsible," I said, my voice steady, marking the end of this chapter. The court proceedings were swift, the evidence was overwhelming, and the judge wasted no time in handing down sentences for theft and restitution for the stolen items. Watching Rowan and his parents face the consequences of their actions brought a complex sense of relief. Justice had been served, but at a great cost. My divorce from Rowan was finalized, a painful but freeing process. Along with it, I pursued legal compensation for the mistreatment I'd endured. As I testified, I found catharsis in speaking the truth, acknowledging the pain I had experienced, and reclaiming my dignity. When it was all over, I sat on the courthouse steps, a sense of closure finally settling over me. The road ahead was uncertain, but I had come far. My recovery was a slow and steady process, both physical and emotional, but every day I moved forward, step by tentative step. The doctors had doubted that I would regain strength in my legs, but now I was proving them wrong. The feeling of pebbles under my feet was something I never thought I'd experience again, but here I was, moving forward. "Your progress is remarkable," my doctor said during my most recent visit, marveling at the strides I had made. His words of encouragement felt like a validation of all the hard work I'd put in. Reconnecting with friends, especially Avery, was essential. Their support reminded me that I was never truly alone in this journey. "We're here for you, no matter what," they assured me, their presence a soothing balm to the wounds left by betrayal. Rowan, once the person I thought would stand by me through everything, had become a distant, pitiful figure. After losing the inheritance he had desperately sought, he barely scraped by. His calls and apologies, drenched in desperation, were attempts to rekindle what we once had. "Can't we just forget everything and start fresh?" he begged, his voice full of hope and regret. I laughed, bitterly, yet free. "Start fresh with you?" I replied, my voice clear and confident. "That's a chapter I've closed. You're just a footnote now." The flowers he sent were discarded without a second thought. "A few roses can't erase betrayal," I muttered, tossing them aside. They were a reminder of how far I had come, of what I had survived. In this new phase of my life, I discovered a love for painting. It became my escape, a way to process and heal. My easel and paints, the tools of my creative expression, had replaced the things I once held dear. Through art, I could capture the beauty of the world around me and immortalize the memories of my parents. "This is how I heal," I would say to anyone who asked. Painting was no longer just a hobby, it was my sanctuary, my way to reclaim myself. My transformation, both physical and emotional, was profound. I had been broken, but now I was stronger than ever. "My story," I said with newfound strength, "is no longer one of betrayal, but of triumph. Even in the darkest moments, we can find light, and this is my light."